roughly around, if we can piggyback off of Washington County's permit or whatever, would seem to make sense. Maybe some discussion with Washington County as to their permitting process and how that's going, or what they plan to do around that railroad. Might make sense.
Yep, so there has been I guess, and some preliminary discussion so far. The issue is that county doesn't do utility. So it'll be pretty much a process driven by Lake Elmo to get that permit through.
Well, but they'll be doing it. They're not gonna stop 5 feet outside with whatever they're doing with the roadway, right?
Yep.
And we would,
So I guess
just some of it, we don't even know what they're doing with the profile of that roadway, right?
well, obviously near the tracks, it's going to have to more or less match or tied to the tracks,
Right.
right? So they're at a stage where they're working towards a preferred layout right now.
Yeah.
So the profile is going to have to very close. It will closely match what's out there today, because there's so much relief. If you look at from County Road 14 down to 6, and which is kind of where we're talking. So the profile is going to remain relatively consistent.
I guess putting it in the CIP is just a good first start.
It's just looking at it here. I mean, they're just asking to create the plan to begin
Yeah.
the engineering, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, we need to move forward with
Yeah.
that, and then that way we're just prepared if it does move quicker or if it doesn't, but I agree if we can coincide it.
I mean,
with-
the other alternative is to say, no, if the developer wants that piece
Sure.
of land, they can put in the sewer, but I think that as an entity, we're probably better served working with the railroad ourselves,
Yeah,
rather than playing middleman to any developer and the railroad at that point.
I'd rather look to assist the developers this way versus maybe some of the other stuff that we talk about later as well.
Sure.
I think there's also a logic, and if we can do it at the same time, we obstruct the traffic flow on that road just once, rather than
Yeah.
a couple of different times. And there's some efficiency in terms of mobilization, demobilization costs that we could achieve if we work with the county on it.
If it's the same contractor doing that work, which likely those direct drilling guys or those tunneling guys aren't, they're not gonna be the people that are doing the road surface, but there's definitely efficiencies of scale and overall cost, and so let's start it off and kind of touch base as we move along and see what timeframes we're looking at.
That's great. Yeah, we'll work with community development to that end to get it set in the CIP. And
Okay.
if you decide to change later, you can always adjust the CIP. Yeah. But I think this sets up the city for the best success moving forward. Yeah.
So we bring this up because in the report, there is a scenario of 5 different scenarios. You want to just do scenario 1, just put a sign up, right? Maybe hire a broker, and then city installs sewer connection. That's what we were just talking about. We kind of landed through the presentation, kind of talking about level 2. There was some discussion about being the city as a developer and going all the way and trying to plan out. And I bring that up today because I think there's an opportunity on parcel 3 that we're going to discuss a couple slides from now. But for this slide, basically looking at, does the council support hiring a commercial broker for parcel 1? So that would be someone who could give us broker price opinion. They could give us a good idea of what the market looks like, field all the interests on the property, try to maximize the value of the property, knowing that their commission is going to be 2 to 3% as a seller, and if they sell to another, like a buyer that has a commission, it would be closer to like a 5% commission. So this is just kind of bringing this up. We talked to brokers in the past, the rail issue. They were saying they market as rail adjacent and go after people that may need or want the rail accessibility. So it's something we haven't really talked about, but in terms of hiring a broker and just going that route in terms of marketing the property, parcel 1.
I'm 100% on board for that. That's, I mean, there's things that government does well and things that government doesn't do well, and I don't know that we've got that expertise. No offense to anybody, but that's not what we do on a daily basis. You know, we don't, government does a better job, I think, overall of maintaining our roadways or clearing snow, right? But wouldn't want to do that with a private entity, but this seems to me as a professional exercise for somebody that does it on a daily basis. That's
Yeah,
my
I
viewpoint.
100% agree with that. I didn't know if maybe the alternative, because you kind of talk about it with parcel 3 as the RFP, is that the would that be an alternative? Is
I
an
would not-
RFP for
We could do an RFP. I would not recommend the RFP for something like this. I mean,
versus, because I think they mentioned for parcel 3 that might be something we'd want to consider.
that is something that I'm bringing up. Just reading the report, parcel 3 is a more complicated parcel.
Yep.
I think there's opportunity there that we can look into. I think for something like this, if it moves forward and the community engagement supports industrial, from what I'm talking to the brokers, it seems like we have interest that we could go ahead, kind of just sell it to somebody and kind of create the guidelines for what we want to see, but we don't have to go through this long RFP process and, you know, we can kind of maximize our value just
Yeah.
putting it on the market.
Well, then, yeah, I completely agree. Full support hiring the commercial broker for parcel 1.
I agree as well. I think that would be faster. Staff all has a lot of things they have to do already, and adding that on is, you know, not going to be as efficient as if we have someone that's their sole purpose.
Okay. So the AUAR, this is basically like an EAW, but for the entire site, and we do it prior to any project coming in. There was one done for the Cyphers project, they paid for it. So that one expires March of 2027. We talked to Bolton and Mank, they gave us a rough estimate, about 50 to 60,000 to extend it, renew it. It takes about 180 days to complete. And the cost goes to the developer. The developer, future developer would reimburse the cost. So that's something that we would want to move forward on, if you support that, and what's your opinions? That way the developers don't get caught up in any EAW issues later if we don't complete an AUAR. The report also talks about, you know, speeding up timelines and making things easier for development. So this is something that we can address prior to selling parcel 2-3.
Did the original AUAR?
I don't know, do you remember?
I don't have it at the top of my mind. I can look, though.
Okay.
Just curious if there's any efficiency, understanding that Bolton and May can do that, but if somebody that's already touched it, been through it, their learning curve might be less.
We could
We
reach
look
back
at-
out to them, get a price, and
Yeah.
bring that back. Okay.
I think that would be good.
Why don't we go with this? Why don't we have them get a price from the original AUAR and get a price from Bolton and Mink, and then we have some comparable,
Yeah. I
like a
think that-
measurement, you know?
I think that's
It may be
fair.
that Nate is so efficient, he'll be better.
Nate's not doing the AUAR.
Yeah, I'll sit on the sidelines for that one, council. You don't want me weighing in on that.
Yes, again, the people that are.
Well, I just think it's good to have two quotes on that. We've got a better price somewhere, competitive quotes, and we can then take a look at the qualifications of the people and the price and pick one that makes sense.
Okay. Any other thoughts? Just move forward on the AUAR? In terms of pricing and, okay. So I'm
Well,
gonna
I
bring,
think I mean, just to your question, yes. Get it refreshed so that we don't have to do the whole thing again.
No.
Yes.
okay. So the other part now is the community engagement process. We talked about at the EDA workshop that we'd bring this with a timeline so people could see it, and just if you have any comments, if you want to add anything, let us know. But moving forward fairly soon in April, starting to announce the project, working with Kathy, Story in the Fresh, doing our website update. We actually have a page for this project. We just need to build it out, add the report, do things up to the page. So working on that in April. And then moving into community input, we're looking at an online survey. We'd want to share that through the website, social media, newsletters, that sort of thing. Have an open house, town hall, potentially 2 here during the day. If we have an opportunity on the weekend to do a weekend event, just to get the word out, we talk about that, if we can coordinate something that is going on before the report. And then we also discussed at EDA having a public hearing so people can come, just discuss the project at one of the EDA meetings, to just get public input at a meeting prior to going into the reporting, which would then happen in July. Just kind of taking everything that we hear, presenting the findings to the commission, the planning commission, the council, and EDA, looking at the direction, next steps, and putting that into a report of the findings. And then that is something that we would publish to the project webpage, hopefully around July, August. And then it would also have high-level steps of, we're already gonna have the steps, but it would show you kind of where we are in the process. And that way, the big questions I think that are gonna be asked are land use. Obviously, we asked ULI to look at what we've already done. Do you think it would be feasible to kind of keep the business park, looking at maxing out land use, the amount, like the dollar amount tax, diversifying the tax base, that sort of thing, having more business park commercial. So just kind of seeing where all that lands, hearing new ideas and kind of approaches. So that's kind of what we see in the community engagement process. And then having a much higher level kind of timeline, which will be on the website, which is talking, obviously, the workshop tonight, but the sewer connection, county coordination, hiring the broker, AUAR, kind of the public engagement, where we think the sewer will work, begin work. Obviously, we don't think it's gonna be June to start construction. That's more of like moving forward with engineering. And then marketing the parcel, basically in the fall, parcel 1. And then the land use and zoning updates. We don't know what that's gonna look like. And there's some strategies that I've been thinking about, especially on that 3rd parcel, that there's no rush to move and do the amendments. But this is kind of like the timeline that we're looking at. So really the question is, anything community engagement wise that you would like to see added, maybe even like a technique or something, I don't know.
A question on the online survey, was that something we're gonna do internally, or are we going to contract for that?
We'll do this online survey will be internal.
Because one of the things you have to worry about an online survey is someone going on 25 times to slant the results. And usually when they do it on a contract basis, they'll look at the URL where it's coming from, or the numbers anyway. And if there's duplicates from the same computer, then they will only accept the first one. And they discard the others, prevents, someone from stacking it on and slanting the survey.
Okay.
Maybe something, maybe MetroNet could do for us, I don't know, I would just hate to see, we get some residents out in the area who are opposed to whatever the concept might be, they want to push a concept, and so we have 13 people that register 50 times, and we say, wow, there's widespread opposition to painting it red.
I think that it's a good point, I guess just to the question here, I think it's really well thought out community
Yes.
engagement strategy, and I don't know if there's anything else that we need to add. I think this gives the community multiple opportunities to participate, whether it's just so they can participate once or if they want to participate multiple times. So I think it's really comprehensive from that standpoint. I think it's a good point. I know we've had a lot of issues with surveys in the past, and then when it comes to council, that argument gets brought up, and then the results just kind of get thrown as a result of it. So I think that's a valid concern. I don't know how much it costs to do something like that, but
I don't think it's really expensive. We used to do, both scientific surveys and these online surveys. And I think a lot more like Survey Monkey was one that was very commonly used.
Yeah.
But the staff, the IT staff would go through and they'd pick up the multiple URLs and
Yeah.
just, and drop everyone but the first one. But it prevented that from happening. And it was fairly frequent, depending on how controversial
Yeah.
the result was or how active, the people were.
Yeah.
I think it was one of the things we heard on one of our surveys before was that there's a group of people who got everyone and their brother to sign on and present a particular view.
yeah. Which, I mean, like, that's, if
They're
it's the same
separate
person
people.
doing it over and
Right.
over, that's an issue. Well, you know, we did this with the old village, when we renewed the plan for the old village, we did a lot of the surveys during the in-person, and maybe that would just be a nice way to kind of complement it, where if we did some surveys with the in-person as well, it's a little harder than to cheat that, short of, like, if you told everybody in her that wants the same thing to show up, but that's knowledge as well. There's a lot of people showing up for it, so.
We've recently, with the Boulevard Tree Program, we've used an Esri product, like ArcGIS, called Survey 123. This was just a form, so I can look into see, because I know we can block
they
like
have that.
duplicates and
Yeah.
set it up a certain way, so I can
That'd be good.
kind of run that past you and see if you think, it's something we already pay for with our
Yep.
GIS, so
Yep.
it's
Great.
possible, we can have them, required names, addresses, so we know.
Yeah.
And then block, it does say like you can't submit duplicates,
Yeah.
so they would have to actually like go to a different computer or, if they really.
Yeah,
want
some
to
things
try
you,
to, like-
you can't stop. If they call every neighbor and say, call in, that you can't stop, that's people expressing their view, whatever it is. But if it's the same person doing it 25 times, that's what we want to prevent.
Okay,
Looks good.
okay. So parcel 3, this is what we're talking about, is you see it, the parcel 1, 2 is business park development, and then it could be kind of they left it open, right? So they had different scenarios where you have commercial along the street. Obviously, we talked about expanding public works. That's, we think, smart to like save the land for public works. But other than that, it was, some apartments, some townhouses, some medium density, single family, and then like larger lot, single family. And there was an analysis done on tax revenue. The small lot, single family brings in the most per unit in terms of tax revenue. We also included a Washington County CDA about for every tax dollar generated, residents request about $1.20, and it's about 30 cents for a business. So we're just kind of looking at blending that. So what I want to bring up here is this is one opportunity for an RFP where we can look at doing a more traditional neighborhood development, something that's more walkable, and trying to get almost like a new urbanist approach to this one site. And we're really not going to have that opportunity since this is the only lot, parcel that we own. Typically, what you would have is the developer comes in, and like what we're seeing in Oakdale, which is you have the Starbucks, the Chipotle, Aldi, and then you have a lot more apartments and residential. But if we could bring a developer in that I've shown in the past, like a Serenbe or like these planned communities, it could be more of an interesting where you have more neighborhood commercial that's integrated, maybe some more mixed use, and you kind of let them tell you, oh, we can bring in townhouses or small lot, and we would guide them, in the RFP process, what we want, density, unit counts, that sort of thing. But kind of put it out you could really put this out to the country through the Congress of New Urbanism, they have chapters, and just share it and see if anybody wants to come in and do something that's a little bit, I would say, unique to the region. I think one of the advantages, it could create a community commercial that benefits the entire area. So people in Oakdale that live next to this development can go to maybe a local coffee shop or like something that's a little bit more local, but local and walkable, and connect it with bike paths and everything else that we want to see in the buffers and the ponding that we have here. So just wanted to put that out there, that in terms of the conversation of the city being the developer, I don't think that's something that we would take on. I don't see how we would actually anticipate the market, like all the stuff that it actually takes. But putting this out and framing it up through an RFP and just seeing if somebody wants to come in and do something unique to this site that I think could maximize tax revenue and give kind of like the best product that you could ask for in terms of like a mixed-use walkable development, which we have it guided in certain areas, but it's very difficult to build. So it'd be nice to see if we could do that here.
I like that concept. Just for people that are gonna look at this online, I don't know if anybody's watching or not, but I know there's a few people out here. There's that big red line through the circle. That doesn't mean it's ixnay or bad idea. That red line represents a gas line utility that goes through that property, just so
didn't even
people
see
don't
that.
take that the wrong way. Yeah, I think this parcel 3 is maybe a little distance off for us, but I do kind of like that concept. I'd like to keep it in mind and maybe see where other people have done an RFP for something like that and how it's worked out for them.
What was it? It was called New Urbanism?
Yeah, New
Is it
Urbanism, it's been
like an
around for a while.
organization
It's an organization.
that assists
Looking-
with RFPs like this?
Well,
or-
they really promote more walkable, traditional neighborhoods, mixed use,
Okay.
kind of like town developments. So they promote that, and they have conferences, and
Okay.
it's a movement of
So
planners
it
and
could fit
architects.
well with kind of the feedback that we got at the first.
I think it can. I mean, it also doesn't stop you from doing some of the commercial along the street potentially, but then integrating other uses more on the inside. And I think one of the things that we've heard from residents and having the buffers is gonna be really important. So
Yeah.
having the buffers and having also lower density, single-family housing buffering with, with the buffers can still be achieved with this type of development. So I think it's a way that we
Yeah.
could, I think it's definitely an option to.
One other thing to point out is I did get a resident that lives to the east of this saying, we don't need a road up on the north side of our development, just, I don't know if we need to put something on there that says like trail on there so people don't hyperventilate thinking there's a road going in.
An arrow.
You know, with the arrow.
Well, it's just a concept and.
Yeah, I just,
Yeah. You know, it's gonna.
sorry, I didn't mean to
come
step
up.
on you there.
No, that's okay. I think this could be a really nice way to hand off a lot of that work. So obviously the city's not developing it, but also maintain a little bit of control to ensure that that this gets developed the way that, from the feedback that we've been given with that RFP process. I guess we're still gonna
Yeah, we
wait
might-
to see, but I mean, I thought the process for the old fire station went really well and, and I guess we'll see in the end, but, we obviously have a community that's really wants to be involved with that, and I think this is a good opportunity to do it that way and versus just having the developer come in and make the decision, which, part of me is, says, well, you have to kind of give the developers that freedom, they know the market, but if we can have a little bit of a say with the RFP, I think that's maybe would be a nice compromise for this acreage.
I think we should do, and I'm all in favor of the RFP and the concept and that, but let's say we get 3 proposals. And you have the aesthetics part of it, but I think we have to develop an economic analysis to say what's the economic cost benefit to the city of each development. So we make an informed decision on how that will impact us, financially.
And if I understood it right from the financial report, based off the few different scenarios where they went all commercial, all residential mix, it ended up being fairly similar, I believe, for all of those from the financial.
It's similar, but it has to do with fiscal disparities when you're building.
The point they miss, though, is these almost create operational costs for us.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And they talked about the taxes coming in.
Sure.
On the fiscal disparities, because the reduction it does some dilution on the commercial side. But when you get into the operating cost impacts, all of a sudden, the commercial has a lot less operating cost
Sure.
impact than the residential. So you want to look at a fiscal impact that looks at both sides of the equation.
Correct.
And to kind of follow up on that too, if you're looking at an RFP for this site, you'd be framing it up in terms of square footages and unit counts and those sorts of things. So
Sure.
at least we have a better idea, like, we're looking for at least this because we know that it's gonna generate tax revenue to a certain extent.
Sure.
I think you mentioned something about it where it's probably, the staff doesn't think it's a good idea. I know it was brought up a lot in the report, but just to have that discussion with the Public Works building, is that even something that we're considering, that with their discussion of considering moving it, since it is the prime real estate of this lot?
I mean, if it were not already established, I'd say, yeah, let's not pick that location.
Yeah.
But I think where it is now, it makes it pretty hard to move that and make it cost effective from what, they were saying the cost would be, potentially moving it to parcel 1.
Which I don't like that idea.
Yeah, I mean-
If we're gonna move it,
I
let's
like-
not move it on this site.
Yeah, I mean, for where it's at, better or worse, it's where it's at, and maybe expand that yard so that it can be used for future use, as the city grows, and it doesn't become something that we have to necessarily abandon 10 years from now. Makes sense.
I think there's a way to integrate that in where it wouldn't be a detriment to the neighborhood. It's gonna take some planning, landscaping, maybe some berms, whatever. That's more of an architectural thing, and I'm not an architect. But I think there's ways to, moving would pretty much eat up a lot of potential return we would get. And, where do you go?
I
One-
agree.
One comment from the report too is that we were hearing people thought that was a landmark. So when you come into Lake Elmo, it's an old red, well, not old, but it's a red barn. You also have the water tower. It kind of serves as that landmark where you know you're in the city.
Right.
And I think people also like that look. And then just, yeah, I mean, the dollar amount moving that, we already talked about this,
Yeah.
but it's just very expensive to
And
build
I
a new
agree with that.
facility.
I guess I wanted to bring it up because it was mentioned in the report a lot, and, I mean, it sounds like we're all on the same page with, leave that there.
I think the only way we could make it a little more friendly is we could put the mayor's picture on the water tank,
That's not friendly, that's painful.
Obviously, this is gonna happen later. We'll bring this back up, right? If this ever
Right,
comes
yeah,
forward, we're
yeah,
gonna
yeah.
look at what's the, how we're gonna frame it up, what are the density numbers?
But I really like what you and the planning group has done here and presented this evening and thought out the process and kind of the phasing.
Can I just ask one more question, actually, from that last one?
Absolutely.
Real quick here, just because I know this was brought up a lot with the neighborhood to the east. Have you received any feedback with this layout, with this design? Because I know, they were concerned about the properties that were gonna be developed right on the eastern portion of this property. Any feedback that you've
We
received?
received feedback during the process, right? So they were involved. I think the challenge is that this site sits a lot higher than their neighborhood.
Yeah.
So I think the buffer that's already built in is almost 400 feet in terms of the land use. So I think not connecting this to their neighborhood was a concern. They don't want
Okay.
to see that. And then also having the spacing. And I think the spacing also helps us in terms of keeping more of a nature-based approach to design. So I think if we do go that RFP route, you're gonna write some of that in anyway. In terms of just like commercial versus residential and types of residential, I don't recall if there was any feedback on that. But we're gonna go through the community engagement process, and that's
Yeah.
kind of like to hash out apartments versus townhouses versus single family.
Right.
And just something to bring up, like, we do have the density in terms of the rec units. But when we were talking to ULI, just my opinion, this kind of maxes it out to where it could be a little bit tricky with the flexibility, because we only have so many rec units, right? So like, this may be too many units of residential
Sure.
anyway, just to throw that out there.
But you can limit that in an RFP,
Exactly.
right?
So in case, just putting that out there tonight, as we move forward, we may not even have the rec units to build what's drawn, especially on the third parcel, especially if the second parcel requires more.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, looks great.
No, I think it's great.
Well, thank you. This is just the questions together. We decided to go through it. So unless you have any other comments, I think we've got direction to start moving forward on this project.
Sounds great.
I think that was
All
an
right, thank
efficient
you.
way to do it, one at a
Thank you.
time.
So next on the agenda is use of stormwater funds to pay for street improvements. So I think that's to pay for the
You doing?
water improvements involved with street improvements, right? Not the whole street improvement in itself.
Correct, just the
Yeah.
stormwater improvement. So this was just a quick history. This has been brought up a couple times. There's more of a council consensus that we should look at it further at the last meeting. So we do not use stormwater funds. I haven't tracked this back significantly into the past, but since I've been here for a whole 2.5 years, we haven't really used stormwater funds for street construction projects, for the
Yeah, and
stormwater
prior to
portion.
that, I don't remember doing that either.
Right,
so.
right. So, so in looking at this, we just wanted to add this to the utility study as a little bit of a review, have a discussion, see if this is something that council wants to pursue in the future. So I provided a little bit of background on the stormwater fund. So the stormwater fee started at $20 in 2004. It was up to $95 for 2025. Our recommendation, which will come next week with the stormwater, or with the utility study, is an 8% increase. That gets us sort of on that path to expense recovery, which is our goal for all of these funds. As we increase these revenues, certainly we'll have some additional cash we can dedicate to the funds. So our early estimates are that the revenue sufficiency in order to pull money out of that fund probably won't come until closer to 2030 based on our current CIP.
Yeah.
If we don't spend what's in our current CIP, obviously that could come sooner. So I am certainly happy to answer any questions as far as, however you want to sort of guide this conversation. I had jotted down some of our steps moving forward, which includes some of our goals for that fund, and the other utility funds, and those are actually part of our sort of larger strategic plan moving forward. So we're looking at reviewing the stormwater fee structure, so that could impact how this discussion proceeds in the future. We will need to increase stormwater revenues. If we're we already need to, if we want to reach that goal of expense recovery. As we're doing that, we can certainly pull money out towards these projects. We are doing a lot of process review and this is an ongoing issue. Nina and I have only been here for a couple of years, and so every time we do the audit, we're tweaking how we're recording and how we're sort of reviewing and our fixed asset list, how we're accounting for things, how we're projecting our expenses moving forward. So we're really looking at this as a long-term, again, strategic implementation of all of these items, and making sure that we are well-funded for capital projects well into the future, obviously covering our operations and meeting our fund policy as we do that. Yeah. That's
Can
kind of the.
you just give me a quick, I'm sure what you were saying kind of ties into your graph that you supplied in the packet, year-ending cash versus accumulated depreciation.
That was just one of the lenses. So we're trying to come up with just a way to look at cash. So a lot of times, at least the utility studies that have been done here in the past, and it seems the focus of a couple of the companies that I've looked at, the focus on utility studies is more about revenue sufficiency. So do we have the cash to do these projects and fund operations for the next 10 years? We are in an interesting situation in Lake Elmo because so much of our capital investment is going to be coming sort of all at once 30, 40, 50 years from now. So my outlook is more about what does this look like? Obviously we want to know that we're going to be healthy for the next 10 years, but given the rate of development, it's sort of a given. I am most concerned with the long term. And so just one of the lenses that I've been using is that how much cash do we have relative to how much depreciation, which is the portion of our capital assets that we've depreciated to date. So those have come online at various points in the past. depreciation rates sort of vary depending on who is putting it in the fixed asset table. It is definitely not a perfect measurement. It is just one lens that I've been looking at to, if we've got $100 million in assets and $20 million in accumulated depreciation, and we only have $5 million in the bank today, and that's just going to get worse over time, right? The ratio. That, again, it's just one lens.
I see that the accumulated depreciation increases at a steady rate. Is that just like a 3% rate increase? Is that what you put in there?
No, depreciation is based on the actual assets that we have, and so those are,
And then I see the fund takes a dip down to 2029. What is that telling me?
there is a CIP project scheduled for 2029, which is the Lions Park. I think the CIP, there's a page of the CIP in the packet as well, actually.
Yeah, I see that.
So I believe that's the Lions Park.
Stormwater reuse,
yep.
lines and VFW irrigation, okay.
The second
Stormwater
line, Phase
reuse.
3 Regional Drainage Improvement Lions Park Pond is $575,000 in the CIP.
Right, that's in 28. Okay.
And then it starts going up because we're assuming at that point the fee is at a rate high enough that we're able to turn that curve around and,
We're also decreasing capital improvement expenditures beyond that point. And that's 575, 80, 50, and then it's minimal out here, because we don't.
more
we
things will
don't-
pop up.
We don't know,
yeah,
right?
more will pop in there, but.
Right, and that's, one of these additional sort of weaknesses we have in our studies is that there are certain areas that we maybe just haven't done the longer-term capital planning for certain things.
I certainly know how we got here. I don't think we can just start doubling up the stormwater fees
Well,
to the extent that you'd cover that.
the problem we have here is multifaceted. First, let's talk about depreciation. When we buy an asset for the stormwater utility, we take it from some funding source, utility, bonds, whatever. It doesn't come off the income statement. There's no line for capital expenditures on the income statement. The depreciation charge is recovery of the cost of that capital asset over time, over the life of the asset. And so, when you look at an efficient utility, whether it be stormwater, electricity, sewer water, you name it, you want your operating funds to cover all your operating costs, including depreciation. You want to establish what's the minimum amount of cash that we need to have in this fund to cash flow for the variation in expenditures and revenues that occur over time, and to replace, a certain amount of your capital assets going forward. When we look at the stormwater fund, correct me, in 2016, 17, and 19, the bonds that were issued for the city included bonds repaid from the stormwater utility. We've issued, bonds, and every year we've issued bonds, except 20 and 25, we've had those portions of those bonds repayable from the water utility. And all but 3 years, we had portions paid for from the sewer utility. So in our other utilities, we finance those capital assets and pay for them over a 15-year bond issue. In the stormwater, we've been doing two things wrong. One is, we don't pay for them from the stormwater fund, we include them in the bond issue and levy a tax to pay for them. There's no free ride. So the taxpayers are paying for stormwater utilities, and taxpayers and stormwater utility customers are not the same people. They're different people. And so the taxpayer gets a disproportionate burden of paying for stormwater costs that benefit tax-exempt entities. And so to straighten this out in a way that makes the most sense, we need to set our stormwater utility up so, everyone that contributes to stormwater pays their share of that contribution. And when you put it on a tax roll, there's no rational nexus between the value of a property and the stormwater contribution. You can have an expensive property that has less stormwater impervious area than a cheaper property. That's why you set the utility up in a way that provides equity. So I suggest in this case, we take a look at these capital assets and say if we pay for them over time as part of our geo improvement bond issue, what would it look like? We have to raise the rates, there's no question. I think, Clarissa's done a good job of looking at that and developing a plan. We talked a little bit last year about, we can't double them overnight. We have to find a way to phase them in and subsidize them in a way that makes sense. And we're going down that path logically. We're going down the path on the street side where we don't have a utility or enterprise funds to pay for them a little more aggressively than I thought maybe we should, but, we're still going down the right path. We have a plan to reduce our debt to half over the next 10 years, which makes sense. But we need to step back on the stormwater utility and take a comprehensive look at that. What if we come in and say we raise our rates gradually to bring it up where it's paying all of its operating expenses, including depreciation, over a 10-year period, as Clarissa stock would be just fine. It's a plan, right?
But aren't we increasing, I remember I moved into my house in 2005, and I think the city was I think at that time I paid like $35 a year or something like that, sticks in my head. And then it's been like 10% per year for a while.
It just hasn't been increased in a couple of years.
In a couple of
so,
years, it
yeah,
hasn't increased,
yeah.
okay.
And that's I'm sorry.
I was just gonna say, so yes, so that's the plan,
Yeah.
but again, this is the discussion. And so it's, we're going to be increasing revenues, therefore, we could potentially fund some. I think that the equity issue regarding nonprofit properties could certainly be addressed in the fee structuring, and we can probably tweak around the edges here a little bit with the structure to fill in some of those gaps. And so there's a lot of moving parts here that we'll get more information
Recall
as we move forward.
a nonprofit entity coming in to try and get his stormwater fees not happen, and at that,
Well, our ordinance provides a reduction.
I don't think we did, we said no to
But
him.
that section of ordinance, our city attorney has opined, probably needs to be changed.
Okay.
So you can't give reductions, you can give reductions in stormwater fees if they put in stormwater retention or something that reduces the amount of contribution.
Right,
But, as we go back, setting, and that's what we asked Nate to do, is set those up so everyone pays their fair share based on
Sure.
contribution. Then we need to take a look at the finance part and say, how do we develop a plan that has stormwater paying for its improvements, whether it's part of the street or a separate stormwater plan? And how do we manage that in a way that's affordable for, our customers? You can't, pay $800,000 a year in cash for improvements and keep your stormwater fee somewhere reasonable. That's why we would issue debt and pay the debt over time like we do for sewer and water.
so then would you then create those bonds as a stormwater payment
It would be
bond?
geo utility,
Revenue bond.
geo revenue bonds.
So is part of your argument saying separating out bonds to pay for the stormwater stuff and have the stormwater fee pay back those bonds versus
Yes.
the taxes? Okay.
Yes, either
I
way, you're
can
paying
hear-
them back, it's just
I
a
get-
question, what's the source?
I can hear that.
And so we do that with our sewer and our water right now. When we issue a bond, if you look at the offering statement, you'll see it says it's a $2 million bond, and $1,325,000 we paid from a tax levy, and $500,000 we paid from from utility revenues. And then you go into a little bit deeper and say, this from water, this from sewer.
So it sounds to me like what Director Handler's, I think that we need to get back to increasing the stormwater fees on an annual basis, just to keep up with the cost of inflation and the depreciation of our assets. But I also agree, and I can hear the part where, when we're doing bonding for projects, to separate that out somehow. But we've started at a different place, but we can't flip it 180 degrees right away, right? Would you
Well-
agree with that? You do it incrementally?
Well, till we see what the pro forma looks like, if we pay for the stormwater utility assets with debt where appropriate and cash where appropriate, you know, what would it take to make it work?
Yeah.
So we're not paying for them with taxes. If that means raising the rates 75%, I say, no, let's phase it in. But what we have right now, it looks like, as I read, all what cap. If we had we have $30,000 cash, and we only take on $50,000 in revenue now. Increase.
Right.
So if you, we don't cash, pay, it's gonna last years, so we can pay it over uses. So it's a question set, take a from that perspective, that means rates, and, you know, one of the dilemmas is we have about, you know, well, I think $14 million in cash in our utility funds, enterprises, water, sewer, stormwater, 14 million, 24 audit said. And so borrow water and borrow cash in the water sewer fund rather than sell bonds and have the stormwater fund pay it back. The downside of doing that, of course, is it would reduce the cash in those funds, which would have a negative credit rating impact for us because we have a lot of debt outstanding.
And we like to avoid that.
So we can borrow the money in the market and keep our cash, you know, within the funds to maintain our credit rating. There's a lot of moving parts here. It's not simple. I just think step back and first construct a pro forma on the premises that we're going to, you know, first collect stormwater revenue equitably from all parcels that contribute. Number two, we're going to look at funding those capital assets over time with debt, and if they're small cash, not everything has to be debt. But, you know, you work up what are the options for that. Good pro forma will allow you to do that. Along with that, we need to establish what is the minimum cash we need in the stormwater fund, you know, to
Director.
cover operations.
Director Handler, is that something we're doing in the utility rates? Is this pro forma?
Yes, you'll see
Okay.
the full utility
Alright.
study next week, or you'll see it later this week when you get the packet. We did not assume that we would be funding it with debt. How hard would that be to change at this point, Nina?
Easy.
Yeah,
I
so
was
we
just
could,
sending you an email about that.
definitely-
I love that
Answer.
word. Easy.
So, I mean, we could definitely
Wasn't there
add
a
that
button for
in.
that?
The easy
Big
button.
red
The easy
E button?
Yeah.
So we just didn't want to, you know, change too much of how we sort of project and manage things without getting a bit more consensus from this council as a whole, or the three of you that are here.
Yeah, right.
The three smartest ones.
Before we sort of presented this sort of change in structure of how we do things. So we're certainly happy to show that. And again, you know, we don't necessarily have to like make a decision immediately with regard to how we're funding our bonds. Really, next week is a discussion of that rate for this year.
Okay.
And then the additional rate structure change discussions will come later. This will be sort
That
of an
sounds good.
ongoing thing.
I now have a little better understanding, because I always kind of wondered how that, because I know that Public Works, some of their, you know, when you're doing MS4 and things like that, or the guys are spending their time clearing out grubs around ponds and stuff, code that time to stormwater.
Yep.
And that covers some of the operational costs and things like that,
You
so.
know, like some cities, and I don't know, the street sweeping's charged against the stormwater utility entirely. Some do tree trimming against the stormwater utility because the leaves get in and block the catch basins.
I don't know.
Milwaukee does that.
Okay.
Not that we have to. I think Clarissa's point is well taken. They have a projection for us for next council meeting, increasing the rates. We ought to go with that. We're not gonna step back and change the world in a week. You know, then let's let Nate get his stuff done with the parcels, and this can be done, you know, within the next year. It's not something we have to jump on, but I think conceptually, we
Well-
have to come to the point that stormwater should pay its own way and not make it a tax levy payment. Either way, we gotta get the money from somewhere.
I can hear that.
And working with staff, Nate, Clarissa, Nina, and we can come up with a solution to this that everyone can live with. And it's not anyone's fault here that the rates are in the condition of the funds financial or where they're at. raising rates every year is far preferable to waiting 2 or 3 years than going 30%.
Right.
You want to
Yeah,
keep up with them,
nobody
and
can
people
budget
can
for
manage
that.
them. The other part is if we do this projection like Clarissa's doing, and it's your best guess over the next 10 years, but it's a pretty good guess. You can't predict, everything, but you can get reasonably close. But our big users can take a look and say, well, here's where we're going to be going, so we can budget for that going forward. It's not a big surprise to them either.
Right.
So there's a lot of merit in the stuff they're doing,
So do I hear we need to look at our ordinance as well?
yes,
Okay.
yes. But we'll need to do that anyway when we look at the
I
change
was gonna
system.
say, it's on the list.
Yeah, it's on the list. Yeah, we need to do that anyway. And the other thing maybe we look at, and I don't know if you've looked, how recently looked at, oftentimes the depreciation life of the assets was more of an accounting life than a real life. And so change those to more accurate life. 50 years is kind of a common number, and, pushing it to 75 would oftentimes make more sense. Again, that's kind of a call with the engineer, what do we expect the life of that, that asset to be. But when we minimize, then we up our depreciation costs, which means we have to have higher rates. So there's a lot of moving parts here, and I
You
think,
get a force main that only lasts 20.
you're right, but sometimes that happens, and sometimes you get 100,
Right.
It's on the average. But I think the steps that we have in here, there's a lot of stuff to be done, but I think it'll get us on the right position if we just follow through on them. And then when it's done, we're gonna pop a big champagne cork, of course, not on city property, across the street, and celebrate.
All right. Thank you for that.
Yes, thank you.
You're welcome.
Next on the agenda, and we'll have Special Projects Manager Clark Schroeder discuss this since City Administrator is not with us this evening. Agenda procedures discussion, which was brought up as to the timing and ability for council to add things to an agenda in a time frame that our current policy doesn't allow, and so Clark will step us through that.
All right, Mayor, Council, we bring before you after council wanted to address the issue of how do council get items on the agenda. I will say that the current ordinance that you're currently working under was developed during a period of less cooperative council. And while the current council might feel they don't require impediments stated in that ordinance, it does not mean future councils will be as accommodating. We need to have ordinances, if you change it, that can function not only for a well-run council, but also a council that has challenges getting along together. So that's when we talk about what changes need to be happen, I want you to keep that in mind. I was here when we put this ordinance in place in 2015, 2016, and it was put in for a reason. The current ordinance basically says to add something to an agenda, any staff member, mayor, or two councils wishing to add an item to an agenda must pursuant to this section shall do so by following the, by doing the procedure here. 11 days basically before council, but it goes to a work session. So the current ordinance basically has the council that they want to add something, it goes to the next work session. And at that point, the reason it was there, so it can be the scope, what the intent is, and directing staff to do research and come back with analysis and a recommendation. The one thing council should remember, you're a policy recommending board. And so it's staff's job to come back with recommendations to fit the policies which the council is interested in. So with that in your packet, you have the current ordinance. You also have a few pages of what other city councils do. There's a number of city councils who develop their agenda with the council and staff during a work session before each meeting. And so some of them meet a half hour before, where they have an informal discussion that would drive future research, future analysis, and future write-ups for council. So the one thing we have to weigh in here is also staff that do all these packets that you see. We've done a approximately in the last 6 months, we've done about 160 packets. Each packet obviously is multiple documents and multiple pages, and staff wish to do and have the time to do a professional job. And so I want to make sure that if council is interested in discussing something, that we allow staff to come back with a recommendation to fit a policy which the council is interested. So with that, I'll take questions, or we can discuss what possible changes council may wish staff to research.
Well, I'm the one who raised this issue. I think I'll go back to what I said before. Staff can add something to the agenda or make a change to the agenda the day of the meeting. It's an elected official, it can take anywhere from 3 weeks to 7 weeks to get something on the agenda. That just seems completely mind-boggling to me. Yeah, we're a policy-making board. We also are a board that approves finances, approves bonds, and it's not all policy. You know, we're paying bills, that's not policy, that's paying bills. And so a lot of councils, a large number have Robert's Rules of Order. And under Robert's Rules of Order, on the day of the meeting, a council member can, before you adopt the agenda, can make a motion to add something, and a majority of the council can vote yes to do it. I'm sensitive to the dysfunction that can happen, but, you know, I think we have to be able to do something quicker. The one we're talking about tonight, after this one, 25th anniversary, 7 weeks to get it on the agenda. A simple question, do we want to do something for our 250th anniversary? There's no policy, should we do anything? And so I think we have to find a way to, as a council person, to amend the agenda and bring some discussion. If it requires staff input, the council should then direct staff to do that research and come back at the next meeting with the information. We can't hold them hostage and make them, their job unbearable either. That's why I think we have 5 people. A majority would be 3, that's 60%. I wouldn't even oppose, if we said it has to be 2/3, which means 4 of the 5 council elected officials would have to agree to add it to the meeting. And if we don't have the information we need, a council member can vote to table it.
So, in the packet, there's, you know, some examples from other cities, and I see a couple of them say you can add an item into the discussion arena, which means you discuss it, and maybe then it goes on the workshop, the next one, so at least there's some thought going into the item on the agenda, but then it can be put on the next workshop agenda.
Is that
But
really?
it's actually, they're all over the map based on city. You can, you know,
Yeah,
you can.
that was just one, or there's a couple of cities that seem to do that.
In my quick review, you had Stillwater, North St. Paul, Cottage Grove, and Lime Lakes that were simply Robert's Rules of Order. I can make a motion as a council, add it tonight. Hastings has one, you had to submit it to the city clerk 5 days before the regular council meeting to get it on the agenda. And it could be any elected official, and ours is just so onerous. It doesn't make sense to me. It's a council meeting, we are the council, it's our meeting.
And I guess maybe just help me understand too where you're coming from with this. So the example you gave, right, with like the 250th anniversary, you have to wait 7 weeks to get that on. And obviously that can be frustrating if it's something you want to discuss and get the ball rolling on. Do you feel like it's kept us from doing our jobs, you know, the safety, emergencies, things that come up like that? Has this format kept us from being able to make sure that we're handling those situations in a timely manner?
Make sure we're handling it in a timely manner.
Do you feel like that's been a concern? Because I guess that's where
Well, in this case,
my
it has.
mind-
I mean, 7 weeks to get something on the agenda as an elected official? I mean, it doesn't take Congress that long to get on the agenda.
Yeah.
I'm very sensitive to setting something up where we can have chaos, like the city has experienced in the past. But I think we have to find more of a median, you know, than where we are now.
So how does that play into, because obviously I have never been on a council that has done it any other way. How then do we take into account the staff time that may be required or needed for an added agenda onto the item the day of.
Well, if we add it on, let's see, the crazy counselor adds it on, and I couldn't, and I make a good enough argument that three of my other elected officials say, okay, I'm for 4. That means it has to be something everyone really agrees we should discuss tonight. You know, a strong majority. So we add it on the agenda. And as we go into our discussion, we realize there's information we would need in order to make the best decision. We can then, agree to have it change it to be added to the next agenda or table it. There's ways to deal with that. I can tell you in the other places I served in government, we could add things to the agenda that evening. Spokane, Washington, 200,000 people, $750 million budget. A counselor could add something to the agenda. If there wasn't sufficient information, staff was directed to, seek more information. The other thing that you can do is as Clark was, you can have an agenda meeting, before, we used to, agenda meeting before the regular council meeting, but that was the agenda meeting for the next meeting. And there you could add things on and direct staff. So you develop it, you develop the agenda for the next meeting before the first meeting tonight. It's just a more expeditious piece. You're waiting 2 weeks to get something acted on, not 7.
I could see, okay, so I have a hard time equating Spokane to Lake Elmo just from a staff size. I mean, Spokane or.
We only had 2,000 employees.
Yeah, exactly, relatively speaking. So when an item comes up, there's certainly enough distribution of workforce that somebody's
Yeah.
probably in tune with that. So I want to be cognizant of that we are not a huge staff. I also am cognizant and aware that sometimes we would like, and I don't think this is something that would happen on a regular basis. I mean.
I don't either.
But also in line of thinking that, you gotta have, so maybe it is, you have 4 council members that wanna discuss it and it can be tabled, and then a discussion be had with, does that allow for staff to gather information? Maybe if it's tabled for the next workshop or the next council meeting.
Maybe we strike a compromise. I think you went down a path that maybe is a good compromise, that a council person can vote to add something to the agenda for discussion.
Yeah,
And 4 people have to agree that we should add it. But we can't take any action on it that night. It would then be moved to the next regular agenda,
I'd
regular
be-
council meeting.
Not have to go to a workshop.
It doesn't have to go to workshop. It could, if the,
It could.
It could, but, like if we have a workshop in
Doesn't
between,
necessarily have
it could go to the workshop. But otherwise, it'll go to the next regular agenda meeting.
so
and-
if you have the 3rd Tuesday, a council meeting, somebody brings an item that they'd like to be on the agenda for discussion, can discuss it, and then it could be on the next
Yeah, but-
council meeting.
And if we wanted
And
to,
that really gives
yeah.
typically more than a week to be able to put some thought
And
to that.
assuming it was something that wouldn't require any research, and there could be, maybe something want to raise a flag in honor or something, it's not, just making stuff. But
Sure.
if it was something that wouldn't require any staff research, the council could maybe then by unanimous vote, have it be an action item.
Well,
I don't know, I'd be careful about that.
I'd like to keep
We-
it
we-
just
Yeah,
pretty.
transparency is an issue, so when we don't put public notice out, one of the more common things that I've seen, people say, I didn't know. And you all have heard that too. Even though we do a lot of notice, you have heard that from your citizens when you make a decision. That would only increase if you add things to an agenda that night and you make a decision, outside of an emergency management type issue.
I do think there's some merit to having an agenda item, a strong majority feels like it's something we're talking about in discussion without any action, so that the item can be made aware of, and then proper notice could be for the next council
I'll go
meeting.
along with that.
The only downside is
Yeah.
currently, right, it goes to a workshop, so it's not just the staff that is given an opportunity to be brought up to speed on whatever we're about to talk about. It could also be the council member. And I guess, I think it's a good compromise. I am going back and forth a little bit on this, is I think it's a working system. as a small business owner, it's super frustrating for me, right? If we want to do something, I want to do it now. But this is when we have 5 people that have to agree on it, and we got to get the community involved with it. I think there is some benefit for that resistance and that time frame that it takes to think through these. And
I think that gives you some time to work through it, though, even a short discussion on something, and maybe it's limited to
you just may not be able to.
10 minutes. Well, you're not gonna make an action on it, right?
You just may not be able to really intelligently participate in it if it's a topic that
No.
normally you would have had to do some research,
But
talk to staff.
But let's say it's the first meeting of the month. Then you're gonna have a workshop in between that and the second council.
But the goal would be ideally
And then if
skip the
you,
workshop with this item.
yeah, but the only time you're gonna skip a workshop is if you make that decision, have a discussion item in the third Tuesday. And then you've typically got 2 weeks prior to your next
Yeah.
council meeting, which gives you time to talk to the staff person, talk to the administrator, talk to one
Come
other
prepared for the
council
vote,
member.
sure. Okay.
It might provide more,
In my
it
opinion,
might provide more scope for staff
right?
when you have a discussion, because there may be just
Yes.
one person wants marigolds in the boulevards.
Yep.
No one else does. And during the discussion item for an agenda topic, we may decide that's a crazy idea.
Yeah.
And, you know, or everybody's buying into it, so then we have to do a little more research to bring back to you for you to consider.
Maybe, again, to provide some more protection, maybe we have the discussion item, and at the end of the discussion, we take a vote to either have it referred to the next agenda, referred to the staff for input and add it to the next agenda, or we say, no, we don't want to talk about it at the next agenda. I'm trying to build in enough protection that we don't end up with where the reason that drove this thing, but to just expedite things, a little faster.
Sure.
And I agree with Clark, if we just do with the discussion, it'd be on the next council packet, and the public would know we're gonna discuss it. I know we have provisions for emergencies, if we truly have an emergency, we can declare an emergency and move forward on it, so we don't have to worry about the emergency part. But it might be, it might be that after we discuss it, the council's majority, we say, we don't wanna add this to the next agenda. So
Could be.
we have a 4 out of 5 to discuss it
Get
that
it
night,
on.
and a majority to add it to the next agenda.
And we could add it to the next agenda or workshop.
Or workshop,
If we
could be
do
agenda or workshop,
Decide
yeah.
we need more information.
Well, I think we'd add it to the next
Discussion.
agenda, but have it part of the workshop discussion. Because that, I don't know,
Yeah.
I
If-
get it.
If there's yeah.
but if there's not a workshop in between, it would go on the next agenda. And sometimes we have 3 weeks between meetings.
Right.
So it gives a little more time. I would just, that said, I know this is it doesn't happen, but I would just ask the council people who are sitting here to give a lot of thought to when they make that motion to add it in. If it's not such a burning issue or time sensitive, maybe we just ask to put it on a workshop, on the next workshop
Right.
agenda. It's,
I think, well,
So if you look at your packet and you look at the order of business at regular meetings, 3.08.004, you would like to see some changes to that ordinance or language to consider at future meetings to change what you just discussed, which is 4/5, to add to an agenda for that particular meeting and.
For discussion.
For discussion only.
Yep.
And so we could put that in the ordinance where it's a non-action item, discussion only, and then a simple majority for adding to the next agenda.
yep, yep.
I think that's fair.
I think that's fair.
I mean,
think
staff, sorry, go ahead.
I think that provides a protection against a renegade council like Dragosich coming up and adding something to the agenda that no one's had any input on and trying to ram it through by jumping up on the desk and hollering and screaming.
Good point.
You do that?
No, he
I haven't
wouldn't
yet,
do
but I've
that.
been thinking about it.
He won't do that.
All right, we'll work on,
There'd be
we'll work on some language for your consideration.
All right.
You know, so for, I suppose it'd be the next meeting then, wouldn't it?
And I think that, the staff input.
I don't think we'll have time to do the next meeting to
No.
do for an ordinance.
That's
So
fine.
let's
That's
put this
fine.
on an agenda in April then,
Get it
okay?
in,
Yes.
get it on
All right.
in April.
First meeting in April would be just fine. And if that doesn't work, the second meeting,
Sue,
April.
you're gonna have to help out with this. Okay.
Yeah. And if there's any intermediate thoughts as we prepare the package, share them with us. If there's something that that for some reason doesn't make sense, or there might be a problem, just share it with us. Let's have a good discussion about it and come to a compromise we can all live with that protects against the stuff that happened before, but doesn't take so long to get something on the agenda.
Sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you, Clark. Next, agenda item is the 250th anniversary of the USA
I
discussion.
think I've occupied the whole agenda tonight.
You pretty much have.
Well, my thought was on that was to appoint a committee to come back and talk about what should be the 250th anniversary. I know we have the 4th of July parade. I wasn't looking to upstage that. I don't think it has to be on the 4th of July. What does the community want, if anything, to celebrate the 250th anniversary of our country? And my thought was a couple elected officials, our civic organizations, Connect Lake, Elmo, Rotary, and some of the downtown merchants, and sit down as a group and talk about what's the wishes of the community for some type of celebration, and when would be a good time to have it, where, what type, and then come back to the council with that. Like, we had so much positive feedback on that street dance last year, and celebrate the 100-year anniversary of the city. And we have a unique chance that won't come again for another 25 years, at 275th anniversary. So if the community doesn't want to do anything, that's fine. But if they do, what would they like to do? Where should we hold it? What should be the things involved? Is it 1 day? Is it 2 or 3 days? And it's just that discussion. I know in some of the discussions I've had with people, with Rotary reps and that, is they'd like to be involved in a discussion, and they think it would be nice to have a city celebration. And I think we just sit down and have that conversation and come back with feedback. The 4th of July isn't as far away as we think. We did last year's 100 in 3 weeks.
Well, that was fairly stressful for me.
Yes, and that's why the 7-week delay is stressful for me. But I think,
Well, here's, and I saw this, and I think I was gone when you originally brought it up, and so I've been thinking about this for quite a while, is, 4th of July this year, 250th year of the USA, lands on a Saturday.
Yep.
And I'm just generally in Minnesota, it's, they go to their cabins,
Yes,
whatever, right?
yes.
So, and us, again, I'll just go back to the size, and I know how much time I put into getting a band, getting a stage, getting the tents, getting the chairs, and putting them up, and thank goodness for the firefighters that were there that night to help me take all the chairs and tables down. And, somebody that gave some community service time to help put them up, but, I just don't know that there's enough of a crowd that would be around for like a big 250th celebration on the 4th of July.
Yep.
I like the parade, and I don't want to bring it's always been like no businesses, no elected officials. I like that it just feels more
yeah,
normal. But what I do like, and what I did like, and what I did hear is that the street dance last year in September, people really like that.
and it
And
could be September.
Yeah, I don't know if that makes sense to say, hey, 250 years, 3 months late, right? But I think that, other cities have some events. We used to have Huff and Puff Days. Now, that was not a city event. That was done by the J.C.'s. J.C.'s aren't here anymore. I think we have an opportunity I think that we're a growing city. I think this is something that, certainly it happens in the old village area, but when I go around to these things, it's the people that are involved in those, it's the same 15, 20 people putting all their effort into that. For me, it's a little discouraging that we live in a community of 14,000 people and I mean, you're just begging for volunteers to help out with traffic control or something like that. So it's kind of a plea from me to our residents that if they like to see community things happen, to actually get involved a little bit and offer up a couple hours of your time to see something good happen. Now, I would like to see somehow we do a fall festival, call it something, and I would like some input from the Rotary, the downtown businesses, Connect Lake Elmo. You know, if the businesses in other parts of our city want to get involved. You know, we do have some great things that volunteers do related to the 4th of July parade, the National Night Out, and Light Up Lake Elmo that happens December. I'd love to have a band where people can come celebrate, hang out, have a good night. I think it turned out great last year. That's something I'd like to see continue.
And I contend, we can celebrate our nation's 250th anniversary, because it's all year long, it doesn't have to be 4th of July. I agree, people at their lake cabins, people are traveling because it's summertime, and, you know, I think the key is to get a committee to talk about that, and the merchants, and how we position it, and where should we hold the street dance, and that kind of thing, and then come back and say, I actually like the September idea myself, but in getting the business involved in our short time frame last year, we didn't get much of a chance to get our businesses involved. So if I owned a business and I look out and say, well, I would like to have been involved, I would have set up a stand if I would have had more time.
Sure.
And so something along that line is what I was thinking, but I know I'm half crazy, but September for the 250th celebration was just fine with me. We'd be celebrating it, and our folks would be in town, and there wouldn't be, so many people out. It would.
Right, and I think that's just, I was like, even if, just from my recollection of trying to get bands and stuff last year, trying to do it for the 4th of July, even if it was 7 weeks ago, would be pretty difficult just because it's the 4th of July.
4th of July, yep.
A lot of them are maybe playing, I don't know.
Yeah.
But maybe that's the discussion point is, maybe we can get this on the April agenda as well, is like, how do we formulate that? And we don't have somebody in staff that's an event planner, right? So it really does need to take, I know typically we don't have the audience participate in this, but I see a Rotary member here, and
Yep.
I don't want to speak on their behalf, but knowing a good portion of the people there, I think that they would certainly like to be involved and a part of that, and maybe as a downtown business, I know you're also a council member, but maybe there's some business people
Yeah,
that
well-
would be interested in that.
And I'll just share kind of, when I've been thinking about this, originally my scope, as I was thinking through it, was more from the stance of, like, not a single event. I was actually kind of thinking, like, how do we put flags out on Main Street, or do we do things like that where it could be out there the entire month? And so less of the event. Again, I felt like the 4th of July event that we do currently is so great. I don't really want to, change that all unless it was,
Right.
Adding fireworks or doing something like that. But I think that's going to be really difficult with being on a Saturday, like Elmo baseball, being there for a tournament. Just logistically, I don't know if that's feasible. So from the scope and scale standpoint, with that question that's proposed to us is, I guess I don't know, but I do think having some sort of group, the commission, bringing the Rotary, bringing the local business, I think that is the right way to go, from my perspective. I mentioned this previously, and I guess this kind of plays into, like, what is the budget for this event? I really do think, the city can play more a role of trying to help promote this, trying to help clear any restrictions, permits, whatever that might come as a result of trying to do this. But I think we look more to the community, to the businesses. If we did the flag idea, businesses are sponsoring flags. To try to make this more of a community fundraised event versus a city. And again, if the
Right.
city has to fund some of this, I think that's reasonable, but I think I'd prefer that we serve more of a role of trying to just kind of remove as much red tape as possible, and try to bring people together to do this.
And I think our staff, again, we have a small staff. You know, I'm not looking to add to their burden. Maybe we get a couple of elected
Yeah.
officials to facilitate the meeting with the business community and, you know, connect Lake Elmo and Rotary. And we just have to have someone to be the spark to get it going.
Yeah.
And have that discussion
And-
about what would we like to have. And it doesn't have to be one day. I'm like you. It could be, you know, 2 or 3, or it could be a week. You know, maybe Monday night is, Monday night is bar hopping night.
Yeah.
You know, and Tuesday night is go to eat night. I don't know, I'm just making stuff up, but, you know, come up
Yeah.
with a scheme where the city as a whole benefits from, and people get together and celebrate being, you know, a resident of this
Yeah.
great community.
I actually really like that idea, kind of like the week-long celebration, a different theme each night that supports the local businesses.
And the mayor has to give a speech every night.
And because Hudson does something like that in the winter time.
Their balloon festival or whatever.
I don't even
forget.
know which one it is. Shoot, it's blanking on me. But where they, you know, then like they have a hockey organization sponsors one night, and you know all the hockey organization kids are out there handing out candy canes, and then the next night it's the dance team, and it just brings the businesses in, brings the community in, gets them involved versus just saying, "Hey, city, do all of this."
We have city hall
Right.
staff versus public works in a softball game.
Yeah. Hey, there we go.
No.
One of the, I'm on a couple nonprofit boards and we do galas. And just like the city, the staff at these nonprofits, they don't have time to do these galas. We hire event planners and we spend money and we budget that money every year so that staff can do their job. But the board is interested in events and galas, we hire people to do that. Something for council to consider if they wanted to have an event.
Yeah, I mean, ideally, I'd like to see maybe what an event planner would cost for something like that, and,
We would
This
probably
is-
need a more definitive scope. Is
this
this
is
a
not
one-day
my,
event?
this
a
is
week
not
long?
my forte, really.
Yes.
Right, so,
Maybe for 2026, we could get our volunteer group to do it and plan in the 2027 budget what an event planner would take.
yeah, and I remember previous to, the city used to have some event that happened, and they did use some funds from the charitable gambling that came into the city to help pay for that. This was pre-2017 or something like that. And they would have a band. The firefighters held, like, maybe in the morning, they did a
Pancake breakfast. It's kind of
breakfast,
all
yeah.
Around the,
They actually did a pig roast.
A pig roast, okay. So, I mean, and it can be a fundraiser for the fire department, and things like that. That, you guys are throwing out a week. You're totally throwing me out of the loop here. 'Cause
We're party people.
I'm all about just light that fire one night and let it burn and then put it out, but.
I mean, I guess maybe just take a step back too. Like, I'm really glad that you brought this up in the first place. I've had a lot of people say, "Hey, like, what's the city doing for the 250th anniversary?" So I do think this is something that the residents do want. Again, I guess for tonight, I don't know how much direction we need to give. If we need to say, "Hey, we want to spend no more than 50,000," and have that brought back to vote on, or I guess what.
I don't know, I think we don't know what we need to spend. Let's get the committee together and look, like we talked about a week long, you know, one thing I saw in other communities was like the church groups or some civic groups would have like a bouillabaisse on Sunday, you know, or a shrimp boil, or, you know, I mean, just stuff, it doesn't have to be fancy stuff, but people come together. And so if I'm the, you know, Little Sisters of the Poor, and I want to have a bouillabaisse, I can sell, you know, sell tickets, and they can make a little money, and people still come together as part of the celebration. I don't know what it is. It's imagine.
It sounds like there's some ideas, Clark. What kind of a direction can we give that would be more specific than, yeah, I think we should maybe Clarissa,
oil.
let us know if there is money from the charitable gambling that we could use. I know there's parameters around it, right? But maybe we put an email out to the Rotary, to Connect Lake Elmo, to, cause they're involved with the businesses, right?
Yes.
And ask them to gather some information and feedback, for discussion on something in September. Is that, would that be?
Yeah, so I think two things. One, for the April meeting, I don't think staff have enough direction to come back with any recommendations, but I think it would be beneficial for us and for Nicole's weekly update to reach out to council, and hopefully we'll have two more council members there at the April, further this discussion, and then encourage council to come with their thoughts so we can coalesce around one thing.
All right.
Because right now, no offense, you're all over the board.
Yeah.
And I think it'd be beneficial for council to contemplate this and then further discuss it at the April meeting to direct staff to do some research.
Okay.
I'd also like to see the notice go to the, our civic organizations, the Rotary, Connect Lake Elmo, and ask them for we could have their thoughts at the meeting.
Is that what I just said? Are you listening, or are you just waiting for your turn to talk?
I just like to talk to hear myself talk.
Jeez.
Let the record show.
In terms of funding, we have almost $30 million in cash and investments in our funds. I think we could find a few dollars to celebrate 250 years.
All right. Let's talk about it. First, April, come with some concrete thoughts, and let's move from there. Maybe I'll send an email out to some of these people and ask to get their thoughts beforehand, so that it's not just us yahoos talking about it. Fair?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd be glad to help you with that task if you like.
Yeah, that's what you said last year. All right.
I'm a politician.
Yeah, I figured that out. All right, I think that kind of concludes what we had for this evening. It really well done, Jason, Ashley, whoever worked on the future land use out on the west side of town. Clarissa, thank you for clarifying some of the issues and things that we're working on related to the stormwater stuff. And Clark, thank you for your experience in dealing with agendas, items on the agenda, and thanks for all the discussion. That was really good. With that, I'm going to adjourn the meeting at 8:04.